Well, it was a long time ago. This was on the 29th of May, 1957.
With Air Marshal Nanda Cariappa, son of Field Marshal Cariappa.
How is it you allowed your son to join the Air Force? Was General Thimayya, who was then the Army commander. My aircraft was hit. I lost control, and my wingman said, "Carry, you're on fire, eject." I said, "I know."
The place where Field Marshal lived his life.
Good morning.
It is indeed a fantastic feeling here. Whenever somebody comes to Roshanara, the place where Field Marshal lived his life, it is nothing less compared to an old regiment or an old army installation. This place has got so much of history. Sir, namaste, good morning. How are you?
Namaste, good morning. I'm very well, thank you.
The thing is, with Air Marshal Nanda Cariappa, son of Field Marshal Cariappa, we cannot interview him without mentioning his father. Probably a lot of questions we are going to ask today will be also about the legacy he's carried forward, his journey in the Air Force, and the memories of his father, late Field Marshal Cariappa. So let me start with the day. Probably no serving officer will forget the day when he gets commissioned. And you were the lucky ones because your dad was there to give you your wings.
Yeah.
Can you take back to the memories? How was it, your passing out parade and the day you got commissioned?
Well, it was a long time ago. This was on the 29th of May, 1957, when father was invited by the then Air Chief, Air Marshal Mukherjee, was given the, I'm not sure what the right word is, but asked if he would come and present me my wings at my passing out parade. And father very happily agreed. The Air Force arranged an aircraft he retired by then, been 4 years retired, and they flew him to Jodhpur, and he came to the parade, took presented me my wings, and after the parade was over, father was interviewed by a well-known Air Force PRO by the name Malik, Wing Commander Malik. So he said, "How is it you allowed your son to join the Air Force?" So he said, and not the Army. So he said, the Air Force needed some good chaps, which is why I allowed him to go.
Dad being from Rajput, being an infantryman, he would have, at his heart, he would have liked you to be an infantry officer, and probably that was something. Did you discuss ever? Because you went to NDA. In NDA, when you join only, you are either an Air Force cadet, Navy cadet, or an Army cadet.
Well, to start with, it was a given that I would join the armed forces, and as was traditional, a son always joined his father in the army, joined his father's regiment.
PC.
If I had joined the army, and I mentioned this to him, I told others also, that I would not have joined the Rajputs, going against tradition. I would either like to have become a Gurkha or a paratrooper. And in the event, however, I had also had at the back of my mind the desire to be an aviator, which I was inspired by a Wing Commander Ramuni, who used to be the chief instructor at the JSW in Dehradun. And he used to come to my aunt's place where I was living, and I knew there was something about him, some aura about him, and I wanted to become a flyer. Then I said I'd like to become a naval flyer, because at that time the World War II was over, and the naval aviators had made a huge name for themselves in the war. But unfortunately, I'm zero in math. I don't understand figures at all. So I joined as an Army cadet, and then in my third term, I was permitted to change service, and I joined the Air Force. Father was in Australia at the time, and who was my, I would say, guardian, was General Thimayya, who was then the army commander in Pune. when news got about that General Cariappa's son wanted to change, become an Air Force officer, the commandant was General Habibullah. He was aghast. He didn't know how to cope with it. And father was too far away. So he told, he asked General Thimayya to intervene and say, can't he intervene? So he said, I'm not going to do that. And even if the general writes to me, all I'm going to say is, here's a young man, let him decide what he wants to do. And the rationale I gave, apart from being an Air Force, wanting to be a plier, it would have been very difficult for me to live up to the very high standards that my father had set. If I had done something that deserved a pat on the backs, they'd say, oh, he got it because he's General Cariappa's son. If I did something which I got a kick in the pants, they say, oh, bad show, General Cariappa's son is like this. Or if I didn't get that kick in the pants, oh, because he's General Cariappa's son, he didn't get it. So in the Air Force, you're your own man, and you have to establish yourself as yourself and not as anyone's son.
So, one more thing is, most children, when they have parents who have achieved a lot, they will have an opinion, have a feeling that I have to live up to my father's expectation, or the way fathers show love to a daughter is different. The way your dad treated Nalini will be totally different the way he treated you in certain ways. At what stage in your career you thought that at this moment I have won my dad's respect, or now I have my own identity?
Oh, I'm not too sure. Very likely after the 1965 war, or maybe when I became AOC in Southwest Air Command, much later in life, that I finally felt that I'd achieved.
On my own, I am something.
Lived on my own, lived up to his expectations, yeah.
So, FMC was kind of in I think Major or Lieutenant Colonel when you were born. In 1939,
I was born in 1938, and I think father was then
senior major or.
I didn't understand what he was saying at that time.
Yeah. No, we can be very casual.
No, I think he was a
senior.
He probably a major or a lieutenant colonel. Probably a major.
Major. And in peace station, what is your first image of your dad as a small boy? If you go back and think, what's the first image of your dad comes to your mind?
Bald. He was bald then, at the age of about 39, 40. And I remember he used to have a horse, and he'd let me sit on his horse with him in front. And that was the first thing that I recall those years.
Did you enjoy riding horse because
Yes.
he was good at polo? He played.
He played polo. He enjoyed riding, but I enjoyed riding too. I did quite a lot of riding after all the riding I did was in the academy, and then after I left and joined the Air Force.
FMC, Field Marshal Cariappa, had an excellent English.
Excellent?
English. He taught in English.
Yeah.
And during those days, the British officers or the officers in South India had to learn Hindi.
Roman Hindustani.
Which is so they were all made to learn Hindi to communicate with the troops. But FMC taught in English and spoke in Hindi. There's a famous story when the country got independent. He just thought today, while addressing the soldiers, he wanted to say that I am free and you are also free and country is free.
Your wives are also free.
And he told, Aaj se main muft, tum muft, desh muft. He was English, was English is the language he loved speaking, and it's the only language with what he interacted with you?
We only spoke in English at home. Unfortunately, I've spent very little time with my parents. They divorced in 1945, 46. And after that, he was a single parent, but I didn't spend time with him because he was too busy fighting wars. I stayed with his sister in Bangalore and her husband and her family. And then just before he became Commander-in-Chief, I moved to stay with him in Delhi. And my sister, who was 5 years younger to me, moved with my aunt and her husband to the Andamans, where he was posted.
He was a forest officer. You were
A forest officer, yeah.
So, Kodava is your mother tongue. Where did you learn Kodava language with relatives, or who taught you Kodava language?
Well, really speaking, I must say that I am A, embarrassed, and B, ashamed to say that I don't know, I'm not fluent in Kodava. And all the Kodava that I've learned and picked up has been after I retired in 1996. So it's been interaction with people here, not so much with my uncles and aunts, but with local people that I've picked up the language. And in similar way, I wanted to learn to speak Kannada. I wanted to learn the language, the script, and things like that. I learned the alphabet. I learned to read Kannada, provided it is clearly, not the fancy stuff. I had a very fine teacher. I think he was a professor, if I'm not wrong, or taught or a lecturer in the Field Marshal Cariappa College. I would go to his house and we practice colloquial, not colloquial, because talking with each other.
In Kannada.
In Kannada. And I insisted that we only talk in Kannada. Unfortunately, his wife wasn't very well. And so he had to be moved. He asked for a transfer. He went off to Shivamogga. And thereafter, I sort of never really picked up to speak the language. There was a teacher, I think her son was an ex-serviceman, or she was wife of an ex-serviceman. She taught me for a while, but it didn't really get off the ground.
So being married to a Punjabi, you might have learned Punjabi a bit earlier.
No, absolutely not, because I spent all my life in the service up in the north, a lot of it in the north, but I've been fortunate to travel all over the country. So one picked up, like to pick up Hindustani, or you pick up Marathi, or whatever it is, wherever you, in the environment in which you are.
In the biography of FMC, we come across small letters he used to write. As a young child growing up, did you crave for your dad's attention? Probably he was a very busy man, being with big responsibilities. So you always dad write to me, and he used to mention your cricket scores and all. How was it growing up as an adolescent or as a high school boy?
Mine?
Yes.
I told you, I was never with as an adolescent.
Yeah.
I was on my own. I was in boarding school. I joined the Joint Services Wing, Air Force Academy, commissioned. So virtually from 1950, I should say, I've been on my own from the age of 12. So there's no question of any adolescence.
So in a way, probably these days a lot of kids are over-parented. Both the parents spend a lot of time talking to them, and this is a trend probably. That time, I think most children would make it on their own. They would take care of themselves, stay in boarding schools, especially if you talk about Royal Indian Military School and a lot of boarding schools which used to take students at a very young age. At around 10, 12, children used to be more independent compared to what's happening these days. How was it growing up, the culture of parenting and childhood?
Well, as I said, my father was a single parent. He was preoccupied with his profession as army commander, as commander-in-chief, and by which time I got on in years. I was commissioned, I joined the Air Force. So really speaking, I was very much on my own. There was no question of any kind of parental or any other kind of influence upon me in my sort of way up the ladder or in life.
So once, while you were studying in Delhi, due to some reasons, the staff car was sent to pick you up from school. And you did enjoy the ride, and next day morning you brought it up with your dad that, I used your staff car to come back. Can you narrate about the incident?
Actually, I have very little recollection of that whole incident, because I didn't even know about it till much later, when apparently the ADC had sent the father's car because there used to be a car pulled by a horse, what they called a gig, and that would pick us up from school. When it was not available, the ADC decided he would send father's car and to pick us up and bring us back. And when father learned about it, after I told him, we rode in your car, he was livid. And he was very angry with his ADC and said, "You have no right to do this. I want a bill for that was being charged for anybody else using a staff car with or without permission. You paid for it." So he insisted on paying for that ride. It may have been a distance about 3-4 kilometers to the school and back, but he insisted on paying for it.
Probably his idea was to make a statement. If FMC could do that, down the chain, people will understand about sense of duty and responsibilities and...
Essentially that, a sense of integrity, really.
It's a small gesture which had probably deep impact in the organization.
You might say that, yeah.
So, FMC saw the world in a different way. Born in Shaniwar Sante, attended Central High School in Madikeri. He had more of a local interaction in Kodagu, then moving on to Presidency College, etc. And your childhood was, which had more of a pan-India exposure with friends from all part of the country. So how do you, when you compare both the personalities, the upbringing was slightly different, sir. How do you, what do you feel about that?
Well, to begin with, I can't compare my personality with his. I mean, he was towering. And I still strive to live up to how he expected of me, and to live up to to emulate him, and to live up to others who see me as my father's son. That am I doing justice to him? Am I being worthy of being his son? So there's no question of comparison, because he had the love of his parents. There were 5 siblings, and he had the love of his parents, and he was with them, as you said correctly, till he finished with school, and he decided to join he wanted to join the army. He was very influenced by his teachers in school, all of whom were, I think most of whom were Englishmen, who were always properly dressed, were punctual, set the example that a child or a young boy or girl should follow.
After Delhi, sir, you studied in Doon School. For how many years, sir?
I was in Doon School for 1 term only. And then father decided to pull me out, because he said, "Look, when I retire," which he was due to do so in 1953, "when you come, you'll be having vacations. Your vacations and the vacations that where your sister is concerned will not coincide. So I'd be happier if you both go to the same school." So he pulled me out of Doon School, and he sent me to the Lawrence School, Sanara. The Lawrence School is a sister school to Lawrence School, Lovedale, and there is a Lawrence School in Pakistan. Okay. So it just so happened that I left school. He retired in January '53, and instead of my sister continuing with me in Sanaa, he brought her south, and I think she joined Good Shepherd's Convent or wherever it was. I continued from school, from where I joined the Joint Services Wing in Dehradun.
Sir, NDA Kadakwas is a huge campus of nearly 7,000, 8,000 acres and lot of infrastructure. So which squadron you were in, and how were the days in NDA, sir? Well,
to begin with, I spent 6 months at the Joint Services Wing in Clementown in Dehradun, which is, we lived in fairly basic circumstances. We shared a dormitory room, 6 in one room or 4 in another. Dry sanitation. The bathroom was about 50 yards away. Firewood would heat up water for bath, and if it wasn't hot enough, you didn't have a bath. Whereas when you moved to Khadakwasa, it was a different ballgame. You're living in almost 5-star luxury. You had a room to yourself. You had running hot and cold water, a very sort of fancy. It was a communal bathroom, but with showers and toilets, but totally different. But, I think most of us really preferred being in Dehradun as compared to in Clementown. My batchmates, I'm talking about, than being in Pune.
How come, sir? You got used to those?
Yeah, I don't know. There was something about the atmosphere in Clementown and Dehradun, which was basic, which was, I don't know, it sort of seemed to be more personal, I think, than Khadakwasa was.
How strict the training was? Like, did you get an opportunity to go out during weekends or once in a month?
Well, yes. In Khadakwasa, It so happened that General Thimayya was the army commander. And he and I'm the same clan as my father. His grandfather and my grandfather were stepbrothers. So technically, General Thimayya is a second cousin of mine. But he was born in 1906, 31st of March. And so technically he was not technically, actually he was an uncle, being that much older. And they treated me very much like their son. They have a daughter. They didn't have a son. Treat me very much like a son. And in fact, my relationship goes back before that, when I was in Doon school, and I wasn't keeping very well also. So father pulled me out and suggested I stay a month with General Thimayya and Mrs. Thimayya. He was then commandant of the IMA. And I was with them for a month. And I think that's when this love and affection grew. And as I said, I sort of, maybe I'm, what's the right word to use?
Probably he was very fond of you.
That this is where this relationship, bloomed and blossomed. So that by the time I'd go to Kharakwasla, it stayed. And the odd weekend, when we were permitted out, he would send his scooter, two-wheeler, to pick me up. That's where I learned how to ride a scooter. I'd spend a weekend with them. I'd play canasta with Mrs. Thimayya, and then come back. And on one occasion, which I remember very warmly, it was a long weekend and we were permitted to go out. So the General and Mrs. Thimayya had been invited to Bombay to visit the first show of a film called Quo Vadis. And he traveled in a saloon, a very fancy thing. So they took me with them. We watched this film and came back to Pune, and that was it.
All your other cadets would have been...
They wouldn't have known, but they wouldn't really have known, no.
So since Field Marshal Cariappa was kind of a strict father, and he was very strict person, and compared to him, General Thimayya was little more flamboyant, little more... His personality was slightly different compared to Field Marshal Cariappa. And what you would have been little more friendly and little more relaxed with, while interacting with General Thimayya. And, tell me about certain things about his personality, what made him...
Okay, well, they were poles apart personality-wise. Yet, professionally, there was no difference between them. You never questioned their loyalty, their integrity, their sincerity, their professionalism. But as you said correctly, father was a strict disciplinarian, and he insisted that I follow certain rules that he had laid down, for which I'm grateful today. I think whether I have fully, implemented what he expected of me, I don't know. But I'm grateful for what has washed off onto me. General Thimayya, on the other hand, was the opposite side. I won't say carefree, but much more informal. And he never sort of really expected he gave me love and affection, as did Mrs. Thimayya. And so I think my relationship with him was easier, if I might use that word, than with my father, with whom I spent very little time in any case.
Because reading the biography of Thimayya, once while he was in Japan, where few troops were not happy with the units, and there's a mention he goes there, plays hockey with them, goes to the barracks, have a smoke, have breakfast with them, and he sorts out everything. He could, the way he dealt with soldiers were also a little informal compared to how FMC dealt. FMC commanded the respect by his stature. Even though he did not say much, everybody would fall in line, whereas General Thimayya would interact very informally with the soldiers also, as mentioned in his biography.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories of the Rajput regiment, sir? You might have gone to Rajput training center and...
Well, I have very little recollection of that, because I was my father's son. They invited me a couple of times to their center. And after father passed on in 1953, his baton was in the house, was with me. And in 1994, when I was Air Officer Commanding Chief in Jodhpur, I decided there's no point hanging on to it. It was not really exactly a heirloom, but it was a symbol. And I decided to present it to the Rajput Regimental Center, which I did. And so they graciously accepted it, and in return they gave me a silver model of a door, a great, I won't say a door, a gateway, as a token of appreciation and gratitude.
So the culture, the young officers from the army generally spend their first 4 or 5 years of service mostly in the field and all, in field areas, in mountains, Kashmir, or probably in high altitude areas. Compared to them, young officers of Air Force have little more better posting where they have a good social life and all. So where were you posted as a pilot officer or as a lieutenant? How was those days, sir?
Oh, mine or his?
Your days as an English.
My first posting was to Warangal, where I've converted onto the Fly the Vampire aircraft. From there, I was posted to Pune, where I spent about 58, 59. I was in Pune for a year. Then I went to Ambala. In Pune, I was converted to flying the Vampire. Then when I went to Ambala, it was to convert onto the Hunter aircraft.
How was the social life of young Air Force officers those days? Probably Pune is a little more social place.
It was. In fact, it was a far cry from where we were. We were youngsters. We had a lot of money. We thought we were the cat's whiskers, that all the girls would swoon and fall for us.
And we would charm people with the uniforms and...
Yeah, well, I don't know, but just the aura of being a fighter pilot. And one of the hallmarks of a fighter pilot in those years was, those years used to wear something like a bush shirt, a bush jacket. And
which your dad never liked.
Huh?
Which your dad...
Father never, but he wore it, mind you. In his entire working year, he was always wearing a bush shirt or a battle dress. Anyway, so used to the hallmark of a fighter pilot in those years, his young pilot, you had the top button of your shirt undone, you smoked Charminar cigarettes, and you drank rum. And you drank rum, yeah. So you were then okay.
Nothing your dad would approve.
No.
Those are the days in Pune.
Yeah.
Again,
and then subsequently
you went to Ambala.
To Ambala, yeah.
All officers who served in those period would definitely remember 1962. Even though Air Force was not involved, it had a dent, psychological dent on Indian Armed Forces and India as a country.
Indeed.
What feelings you went through when 1962 unfolded and India faced some sort of humiliation?
Well, I don't know about the humiliation at that point in time, Doc, but I was posted in Palam, in Delhi. We were flying the Hunter. We flew missions preparing for any eventuality to attack Chinese troops in the mountains north of Delhi, in the Ladakh area. We flew in the valleys to get accustomed to flying in those areas. We flew air defense missions in case there was any incursion from the Chinese, but the Chinese didn't have any air force at that time, so it was of no consequence. So the debacle that followed was not something that impacted
Air Force
the Air Force, except for the fact we did have a couple of heroes helicopter pilots who flew in to evacuate casualties and bring them back. But otherwise, the Air Force was always, why can't we get into the act? Why? But I think at that time, for whatever the reason was, whether it was Chief's decision or whether it was Nehru's decision, we felt that by using the Air Force, it would escalate.
India did not want to escalate.
And the Chinese didn't have any Air Force to speak of. In fact, we were probably better off than them.
Better off for taking the war.
They were operating from high altitudes and we were at lower levels. So we were really better off. But anyway, that was history.
So going back to FMC again, I think this interview will be very incomplete. Back in time and again, we'll go back to FMC. He had a very holistic vision. Probably he was more of a leader also, because wherever he went, he tried to solve issues of women, issues of the society. In being in Afghanistan, he once solved water issues for the
Not in
tribal
Afghanistan, northwest frontier, in
frontier,
the
Pakistan.
frontier provinces. Yeah.
Pakistan. He solved water issues for villages where all the tribesmen were very impressed, and they had developed a good relationship with your father. So, how did this vision of him come from?
I don't know. Essentially, I enjoy meeting people. He felt he had a responsibility. We were brought up in the armed forces, as you will remember. The honor, safety, and welfare of your country come first, always and every time. The honor, safety, and comfort of your men come next. Your own honor, safety, and comfort last always and every time. So he is essentially a humanist. And when he was commanding his brigade in an area known as the Banu Brigade, he'll go around in a jeep. He'd see this long line of women going from A to B with pictures on their head, and he'd stop and through an interpreter ask, "Where are you going?" "Are we going to collect water?" "Why?" "We don't have any water." "Well, nearest place 5 miles away." So I think he went back to his headquarters and he'd asked the engineers there to go to this village, excavate a well, and after that he sort of, is a question winning the hearts. Essentially, that was basically
what army started doing out 50 years.
Winning the hearts and minds of people. That was his bottom line. It was the same kind of thing that he did in Kashmir before he became commander-in-chief, and after that. And it is the same kind of thing that when he would, during the war with Pakistan and immediately after that, he'd always go around in an open jeep. And if he ever met any of the village or locals, he'd stop and say, "Is all well, this, that?" And "Yes, we're grateful to the Indian Army for saving us from the Razakars, but we don't get salt and rice." So from that point onwards, he told all his staff officers, wherever you go, you will carry some rations to give to the locals. So much so that this was greatly appreciated. And there was one particular occasion when he and General Thimayya was commanding the Div, 19 Div, and father was commander-in-chief. The two of them got together outside a church or a mosque in a place called Baramulla and carried with them a large amount of rations. So the locals all thronged, came in large numbers. So they were all milling around, and he insisted on discipline, quiet. They were given these rations. Now this was greatly I didn't know about it till much later. And there was an article in the Indian Express by a former, I think he's a congressman, a former minister, a chap called Professor Saifuddin Soz, who said that there is a park named after my father in Baramulla. And there was a particular word that was used. This was an appreciation of all that he did for the locals. And I happened to visit that park in about 3 years ago. Right now there is an arch, it says Cariappa Park, nothing in there, but I met the locals and they were planning to spend, money had been released to do it up as a kind of not exactly a culture, a center where young men particularly with a library and a sports facility and things like that. So that was it. And father had this thing about winning the hearts and minds of people, which was essential. It wasn't a question only of building schools or bridges or roads and things like that, but this is the kind of thing that I think endeared him.
So the culture in the army is we don't remove our shoes when we enter the mess. We salute even the dead with our boots on. That's the culture. Historically, when Field Marshal Cariappa goes to greet Mahatma Gandhi, he does a very significant thing. He removes his shoes and goes. Probably, and Gandhi was stunned why an army general is removing his shoes. And that leaves an impact on Gandhi also. FMC tells, you're like a god, you're a godly man. That's why something within me told me that I should remove my shoes and meet you. Did FMC ever recollected his interactions with Gandhi?
No, I never spoke about it. I must get this clear. Because of this huge age difference between my father and I was never privy to the kind of things that went on in his mind, his interaction with various people and so on and so forth. The first I knew about it was perhaps there was a gentleman, a biographer, Gandhiji's biographer, a gentleman called Pyare Lal, who had written about this visit that Father had made to Gandhiji, and to seek his blessings or guidance about the importance of about the army and why we must have an army to protect the motherland.
So one more incident. Your dad, being a chief, he was very fond of going and meeting ex-servicemen. Once he goes to some northern part of the area where a blind ex-serviceman comes and tells your dad that I can't take care of my son. He just brings that boy named Shekhar to Delhi and Sundar to Delhi,
Sundar
and
Singh,
he stays with you.
Yeah.
Can you narrate the incident? Maybe it's like,
Well, I don't know the circumstances that this happened, but what you're saying about this ex-serviceman who said he was blind, had this son or grandson, and he wanted him to be given some kind of a quality of life. So Father decided to take him on, not really adopt him as such, but he kept him at home, and he was probably the same age as I was. He was kind of a playmate, and I don't know what, this is as long as I was, till 1953, and then when Father retired, I don't know what happened to Sundar Singh.
it is written somewhere that he joined Navy later on.
I have no idea.
Probably,
I think he did join the Navy.
These incidents gives an account of Field Marshal Cariappa's commitment towards ex-servicemen and commitment towards something if he had something in his mind. So let's fast forward to 1965. Now the Air Force gets involved. On the last day of war, you are on a mission deep inside Pakistan. What memories you have, sir? That on that day, what happened?
Well, to begin with, it was on the 22nd of September. I was tasked to lead a formation of 4 aircraft to go and strike targets of opportunity across the border. No specific target per se. And so we all started our engines together. Before we taxied out, one of the aircraft had a problem. He didn't taxi out. So 3 of us went. At the takeoff point, a second aircraft, 3 of us got airborne. Before crossing the border, one aircraft had to return because he had a fuel problem. So only 2 of us crossed. A chap called Sehgal, who was my wingman, and I. We went across, we saw tanks and convoys, we struck them, and on the way back, we were being fired at by an army formation, which we attacked, and that is when my aircraft was hit. Multiple hits, and it was on fire. I lost control, and my wingman Sehgal said, "Carry, you're on fire, eject." I said, "I know," and I ejected. We had a very fine ejection seat in the aircraft, and next was one moment I was in the aircraft, and next moment I was sitting on my butt.
Surrounded by enemy soldiers, or?
No, I didn't know they were enemy at that time. I surrounded, people came up wearing khaki uniform, and
I looked like BSF.
And I thought, yeah, absolutely. Till the enemy, until our own guns opened up to attack this wherever it was, and that's when they said that those are your guns. That's when I realized it was in Pakistan hands.
That time your dad was in Delhi. FMC was in Delhi.
I don't know where he was, Doc. I think whether he was in Delhi or whether he was in Kurg, I don't know. But there was a bit of incorrect information to say that Ayub Khan rang up and spoke to Father, and that's not true. He passed a message to the High Commissioner in Delhi to inform him, to tell him to inform my father, your son is a prisoner of war, and he's being well looked after. If you want, we can release him. And that's it. But all this I learned only after I was repatriated, much later.
When Field Marshal Cariappa was a brigadier, Ayub Khan, who later became general, was his ADC, or what was he?
When Father was commanding the Banu Brigade, then Colonel Ayub Khan was commanding a battalion under Father.
So he had great respect for your dad.
Well, he had a lot of respect for him, which is why they got on. Well, when he became president and field marshal, he invited Father a couple of times to Pakistan, and he said, then sort of at some point, Father said, "I'd like to go to East Pakistan," so he laid it on for him to go and visit
Bangladesh.
East Pakistan at that time. Yeah.
So since Indian Army and Pakistan Army we have our roots in the British who raised both the units, the mess culture, the JCOs which are in both the services. Essentially, both the armies have same culture. Did you see anything of that sort when you were in Pakistan for a few months, the way the food, the way the Jawans greeted, or how the regiments run?
No, nothing at all, nothing like that at all. We were completely isolated. For the first 8 weeks or 10 weeks, I was in solitary confinement. Then when I went to the prisoner of war camp, you didn't meet any of the Pakistanis except the camp commandant, who would come and find out is everything all right. Then we were divided into 3 groups. There was the army, the Sikhs, who included the army, and 7 of us Air Force officers. So we were all in separate compounds. And you never got, except there was a medical assistant, a nursing orderly, who would come to dress our wounds from time to time. But otherwise, there was a colonel who was a camp commandant. Didn't get to meet her. No question of interaction with anyone else from the army.
Sir, in one of your previous interactions, I did ask you, in the heat of the moment, when your aircraft was on fire, how are you able to eject out? You told me one thing, it's the training. So everything at the end amounts to training. Now coming to that solitary confinement and weeks being alone in the enemy land, how did you cope up mentally then? Did you think a lot or?
Well, one thing is, once you're like this in adverse conditions, in an adverse environment, it's not a question of retrospection, but for one thing, you're grateful to be alive, number one. Number two, in this cell in where I was kept, the doors were kept closed by day, so my room was in complete darkness. And at night, they were open, the bar doors were there, the lights were on. And the only awareness of the outside world was sparrows, which used to come into the skylight or something like that. And, or if you were taken, there was no attached toilet, so you're taken to a toilet maybe 50 yards away, but you're always blindfolded. But you're vaguely aware, okay, but you see leaves and things like that. But that was all.
So the food?
Food was
basic.
Pretty, we kept us alive, and we had, in the main prisoner of war camp, when I was solitary confined, I was given food from the langar, but which was roti and dal. Everything was vegetarian, not non-veg. And in the main prisoner of war camp, food was pretty dismal because we'd have breakfast at that time. Before we started getting Red Cross parcels was, I think, a couple of puris and a mug of tea at 7. Lunch was at about 11:30 or 12. Was rice, very watered down dal, and something we call lacy bindi. You know, when a lady's fingers are overcooked, it gets to be quite glutinous and things like that. And dinner was exactly tea was at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. Same at dinner. But life, the food at least, greatly improved once it was. We were acknowledged as being prisoners of war and were entitled to privileges of the Red Cross. We were, I think, given a princely salary of 65 rupees a month, with which you bought your toiletries, and they also used that money to give you firewood for fireplace, to buy a quilt and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it was.
So that mental strength kept you.
Well, when you talk about the mental, I was never any good at mathematics, as I start by saying. So I would try and do some kind of arithmetic, computations, calculation. Not that it got very far.
You had any friends to interact then when the Red Cross got involved, or it was always solitary confinement?
No, the Red Cross, we got our first Red Cross parcel, I think it was on the 4th, 7th of December. And by
3
now,
months. After 3 months, till 3 months you stayed alone?
No, for 10 weeks.
10 weeks.
Yeah. And then moved to this prisoner of war camp. And it's quite a coincidence that I think somebody told me that General Thimayya had died on the 18th of December. And I wasn't aware of it. Quite coincidentally, though, on the 14th of January, which was my birthday, I received a Red Cross parcel, a small little matchbox, in which there was a jade statue of Ganapati, which he always kept on his table.
Who, sir?
General Thimayya.
Okay.
And when he passed on, his wife put this and sent it to me as a Red Cross parcel, which I got on my birthday.
In Pakistan?
Yeah.
This is an amazing story.
Yeah. But
then you knew that General Thimayya is no more.
By then, yes, because he died on the 18th of December.
He died abroad, I think.
In Cyprus. Yeah.
And once you came back, sir, how bad were the injuries, sir?
Well, I cut my shrapnel here, left arm, and I had my spine was fractured, and so I couldn't move. They put me onto a stretcher, took me to the after some first aid, took me to the hospital in Lahore, where they did the X-rays and things like that, and didn't give me no treatment apart from painkillers, I think. And then again, I was in solitary confinement in the hospital. While I was there, I was visited by General Musa, who was the army chief at that time. So he'd obviously known that I was my father's son. And he said, anything I can do? So I said, I'd like to join the other prisoners of war. So whatever happened, a few days later, I was then flown from Lahore to Rawalpindi and kept in solitary confinement there, still not with the rest of them. And from there, after about 3 weeks, I think, or 2 weeks, then moved by train to the main prisoner of war camp in a place called Dargai. It's a fort in the northwest frontier.
So when did you started walking and moving? How long did you take?
Oh, straight away. I saw. Once I was out of hospital, I'm not. Yeah, I could move to walk to the toilet and thing like that. That was not. It was just a pain, and it was not that I was paralyzed.
So coming back to India, then I think were you put on low medical category that you?
Oh yes, I was low medical category. Not permitted to fly aircraft with ejection seats, and so I was then posted to. I had gone from Allahabad at the pilot training establishment, and so we returned there. And in the meantime, there was this talk about going as ADC to the then Air Chief Marshal Arjun Singh. So in June or July 1996, I'm sorry, 1966, I went to Air Headquarters as ADC to the Air Chief, with whom I served till February 69, and because I was still low medical category. And then I asked if I could I wanted to get back to flying, and I could fly helicopters. He said, why do you want to do that? So I said, well, as a squadron leader, I'm commanding a unit. So he very graciously accepted. I did a helicopter conversion, and I went to command a helicopter unit in Hasimara, and where I was for the duration of the Bangladesh war. By now, I'd got a full flying category back, and I was able to fly ejection seats. So I asked if I can go back to flying fighters, agreed, and that was that.
You flew fighters once again, sir?
Yeah.
When was it after?
In 1972.
72.
December 1972.
Again, I would like to go back to the phase, because your profession is very important for anybody, whatever it may be. You are trained as a fighter pilot. Once you are put under low medical category, and you know that something which was very dear and you trained all life, you can't do that anymore. How did you take it? How did you cope with all these things?
Well, I said, fortunately, being ADC to the chief, I traveled a lot with him. I did a lot of riding in those years because I was with the chief.
Again, riding is okay.
With the horses from the president's body.
Was it good for back, sir? Again.
Well, I didn't ask, but I rode, and I had this opportunity of serving with the chief. Done 2.5 years. I wanted to get back to flying, and I knew I couldn't get back to fighters. I did not want to fly transport aircraft, and as a squad leader, I would command a helicopter unit, which I did.
Again, one more year in the landmark of Indian Army or Defence Forces, 1971 war, when Bangladesh was liberated, sir. By then you were with, where were you posted? And
I was in Hashimara, commanding a helicopter unit, and on the 10th of December, I remember the date clearly, my unit, with two aircraft were sent off to Agartala, from where the main helicopter force was located. And from there we flew missions across the Meghna River carrying troops across, which hastened the capitulation of Bangladesh and the occupation of Dhaka.
For a fighter pilot, wife is considered like a navigator or a co-pilot. So you got married, ma'am came in, ma'am being a Punjabi from a different culture, different background. How was it, sir?
Well, first of all, you must get this straight, that both Meena and I are married twice over. So at the time of the 65 war, we were not together. I was married. My wife was also, first wife was also from the Punjab, from that part, from Bhavalpur, from West Pakistan. We were together till 1980 odd. And then we separated and divorced. And Meena and I married in 1989. And when I had gone to take over as Air Officer commanding Gwalior, that was her first Air Force station.
So one more thing is, in the defense services, whichever background or whichever caste or whichever language you come from, there is a pan-India culture, the pan-India culture of eating, greeting, meeting people. So a South Indian will get along with a North Indian, a Punjabi will get along with a Tambi. How do you think army as an institution where it's a melting point of all the cultures?
Well, I say this, Doc. There is no entity, no body in this country like the armed forces. We are taught national integration. In fact, we are the last bastion of national integrity. There is no differentiation between a Muslim, a Sikh, Christian, Jew, Hindu, whatever your relationship. And being from the army yourself, you will know that in an army unit, particularly more than in the Air Force or Navy, there is a structure that is created, single roof. They're adjacent to each other. There's a mosque, a gurdwara, and a temple. And if it was a Christian thing, maybe a church. And you had either Maulana or a Granthi or a Pandit doing, if the Maulana went on leave, the Pandit would go into the mosque and read from the holy book. Or if the Granthi went on leave, the Maulana would come and preach here. So, I mean, you learned that we're all, we all have blood, same color blood, which unfortunately is not so when you look at the bigger picture as far as India is concerned.
So, fighter pilots love fast cars and bikes. What are the vehicles or bikes and stuff you owned during your service? Any fond memories of that?
Well, I couldn't afford it. My first vehicle was a bicycle. Second was a two-wheeler, a Vespa scooter. And I didn't own a car till 1972, so 15 years after commissioning. And that too, I didn't buy it. My wife had a car. She was living she just had our second daughter. And she was living in Delhi and I was in Hasimara. So she had a car, which I drove. But so even I didn't buy them. I think the first car I bought was after I retired and came and settled in Kurg.
But then that's the best part of being the army. I was armored corps RMO. So that T-90 tanks worth 40 crores, we had a chance to drive them. So, but then you would drive all those fancy aircraft, which was very, very expensive in spite of, So I think, sir, bikes. One more story of a lot of Air Force officers were fond of bikes. Sir. Which bike did you have in
I had only a Vespa. I didn't have a motorcycle. Unlike you, yours a Harley Davidson or
it's Royal Enfield.
Royal Enfield. Okay.
Very interesting. So, for Field Marshal Cariappa, it was very easy to come back because he had come back to Madikeri, come back to Roshanara because he had cousins and he grew up with all those cousins with extended family.
His brother, his sisters were here.
Sisters were two sisters.
And two one brother was here. The other brother was in Chennai, Bangalore. Then he also came and settled in Madikeri.
And compare, since you were not born here, you traveled all over the India, and again you decided to come back to Roshanara. Like what made, probably a lot of officers, generals, air marshals have retired in Bangalore, Mysore, Mumbai. What brought you back here? What?
Well, essentially, I didn't have the money to buy an apartment outside or a house. I was blessed by my father to inherit a home. He bought this place in 1948, and there was no question of living anywhere else. My last posting was in Jodhpur, and when time came for me to hang up my uniform, friends there would say, look, why do you want to go back there? You're out in the boondocks, in the sticks, you don't have electricity, water. So here you got friends, the hospital, canteen facilities, and so on. So I said, look, apart from the fact that there's this home that I have inherited from my father, the other thing I would often repeat, and when father was asked this question, he said, in Delhi, if you don't have electricity, you complain. You no electricity, I can't have air conditioning, I can't listen to music, I can't do this. And father would say, when I go to Kurg, I open my doors and windows for air conditioning, and my music is from birdsong. Today in Madikeri, here in Roshanara, we don't have fans. In the summer, it's a good 5 degrees cooler than outside, and it's fairly warm and relatively warm. Our doors and windows are always open. So there's always cross-ventilation. And quite honestly, Doc, I couldn't think of living, now having been here now almost 30 years, I couldn't afford living anywhere else, leave alone think of living anywhere else.
Yes, sir. I was speaking to ma'am. Ma'am told me one certain thing about you. He has seen
nice or bad?
A lot of good things.
Oh, thank God. Okay.
A lot of good things. He has seen Field Marshal Cariappa when he was in his late 80s.
Yep.
And he told his son is way more fitter compared to how his dad was then. And she attributes for your cycling, you go to gym, you play a lot of golf. How do you keep yourself so physically active?
Well, it's important to me, whether it's a question of one's ego to be fit and so my clothes don't fit and I'm not bursting at the seams. And so it was important. And I just like to try and spread that word across to others. And it was an ego trip, maybe you can say, that I wanted to look good, I wanted to look smart. And when I look back at my father at the age that I am now, I can't visualize, even imagine him doing the kind of things that I do.
Because I see you in the gym, it's like you made a conscious effort to stay fit in the later years of life.
Yeah.
But that culture of fitness came into the armed forces very later on, because at some point of life, a lot of officers are very fit up till 5-10 years of service. Then it becomes more of a desk job, the eating habits, sleeping habits.
No, Doctor, that's not quite true, because in the army, for example, till such time, once you get to the rank of commanding a battalion, you have got to be absolutely fit. In the Air Force, you got to stay fit if you want to be capable of flying a fighter aircraft. So in later years, all our squadrons or messes would have a small multi-gym. And pilots particularly were encouraged to avail of we may not have had a trainer, but go and avail of this. We always had squash courts, tennis courts. So you're always encouraged to play games, whether it's playing hockey with the men, playing football, basketball, whatever it was. But you were encouraged to play. But it was a question of keeping fit.
So it's a known fact that you love your dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that. How do you develop fascination?
Oh God, they're my life. I have two. Have you seen them? One is a black Labrador, Bagheera, and the other is a cross between a Dachshund and, you won't believe it, I think a Rottweiler. But they're my life, and they're my family. So much so that when I leave town, I'm virtually torn by having to leave them. And particularly both of us are going to be. If Meena is not here and I'm in town, that's okay. Yet on one occasion, she was away and I was going off to Bangalore for some reason. And I had two dogs. But we always had a Labrador and a Dachshund. I got as far as Suntikopa. And I said, I'm not going, I'm going to come back. But I didn't do that. But why we've got good help at home, they love the dogs, dogs really love them. I don't know, there's just something that I feel that I'm so grateful they're in my life, and the amount of love and affection I receive from them. You come back from, even I've been out for half an hour or 45 minutes, come back and they're there to greet you. So I always carry some biscuits or we have some rusk at home. Then of course I've got this thing about dogs and horses. They ask for absolutely nothing, just love and affection. And for what I've started doing for the last month or so, there is a dog. She has 2 pups. And somehow she sensed, when I first saw her, I'd sort of stop and give her biscuits. The pups would come up. So much so that nowadays, when I go, this is in Ashokpura, when I go through, she recognizes my car and either chases after me or expects me to stop. And I always have biscuits in my car to give to them. There's something about a dog with me. As father would say, the more I see of mankind, the more I love my dog.
Your father also did love dogs?
He never really kept dogs per se. I think at one time he had a black Labrador he called Kim. And then here in Roshanara, he never had, he never kept any dog, no. And Kim got his name because of my grandfather was K.I. Madhapa. So hence.
And think, sir, you are Cariappa.
Yeah.
How did it happen?
For the reason that when I was born, both my grandfathers were alive. And traditionally, I suppose one would be given one of their names. So he said, rather than creating any kind of ill will or why him, why not me, he said, I'd give them my own name. That was non-controversial.
You are Kodandera Cariappa, it's again. And Nanda is the pet name.
Yeah.
Looking back at, sir, you retired at the age of 60.
58.
58. And Field Marshal Cariappa, he retired at the age of 54.
53, yeah, 54, you're right. 1899, yeah.
And, so looking back, don't you feel that yet 54, a person has a lot to give? Probably 54 to 70 are the best years of life as far as leadership roles are concerned. What do you feel about that, sir?
Well, I suppose, you've got to make place for others. You can't just hang on to your seat because I'm young, I'm not going to move out. For example, when I served as ADC he eventually became Marshal of the Air Force. He retired at the age of, 1919 born, he retired at the age of 50, 1969, having done 4 years as Chief of the Air Staff. But as I say, this gaddi, or whatever the seat, you can't keep it warm for as long as you live, but you've got to make room for others to move in and move up.
Sir, you were a helicopter pilot, you were a fighter pilot. Did you ever consider of being a civil aviator or something?
No.
Had no fascination for civil aviation. So you decided at 58, I'm going back to Roshanara, and
I had no choice.
Okay. Excellent.
And then it was 58 years, Dad had passed on by then. And so I came here from Jodhpur.
So, you have 2 lovely daughters. How are you? How was Field Marshal Cariappa as a grandparent?
He didn't see very much of them because, as I told you, we are married twice, and for the years that father was alive, they did come and visit. They stayed with my former wife, and so didn't really get to know them as such. But you'll probably meet them in the next few days. Both of them are going to be here. They're coming to a family wedding on the 5th of September.
And how is your equation with your grandchildren?
Oh, I love them.
You are a very notable voice as far as environment is concerned, protecting our ecosystem is concerned. How did that happen?
Well, it's the environment talk where we live. I mean, when father bought this place, it's always been forest. It was 50 odd acres of land. And so he gave away a little, he sold a little because he needed the money. And eventually, so he was asked, why don't you grow coffee? He said, no, I don't want to grow coffee. And I'm grateful he didn't, because when you look at it today and all the trials and tribulations that a coffee planter faces, where there's a question of availability of labor, enough rain, too much rain, berry borer, the blights and things like that that affect mains have gone, I think. I'm glad because in this area I inherited 20 acres of land, and we have on a couple of occasions an elephant has passed through. The nearest we've had a tiger on that hill going up to Microwave, but that did nothing. Otherwise, we've got Karma, the barking deer.
Yeah.
We've got porcupine, hedgehog, the palm civet, variety of snakes, and wide variety of birds. I mean, where else would I get all of this?
So, a decade back, I accidentally ran into General Nanda, who was going for a walk near Nandimote.
Mm.
And then he had a similar discussion. He spoke about all the wild animals in his locality, and he told, I have left shooting the day I retired from the army.
Okay, huh?
He's your first cousin.
Yeah.
He's your first cousin.
It was his parents that I lived with after my parents divorced. I lived with his parents in Dehradun.
How was he as a person, and your memories of him?
I was very fond of him. He's 7 years old, elder to me.
Okay.
May 12th was his birthday. I think he died on December 12th, so many years ago. But I was always very fond of him. And once we retired, didn't see too much of him, even when he had in court. But I was very fond of him.
So coming back to Madikeri, did you have many friends here, or you had to make new friends? No,
I didn't know anyone at all here, Doc. It was mainly my family, and then having spent time, one sort of got to know people. But didn't know many people when I first came here.
Sir, before knowing you, on a New Year's, every New Year I see you going and meeting a lot of public officers and wishing them and giving them sweets. In post office, once I saw you. How does this culture of acknowledging different public officers?
They do a service and you want to thank them and go to the fire department to take some sweets. What I've started doing recently is every first of the month I give this very nice lady Chaitra, the executive junior engineer, electricity. I leave some money with her. They please buy some tea or coffee and some sweets to thank your linesmen for this thankless job they do, difficult, dangerous job. And just my way of saying thank you very much. In fact, when shortly after, sometime after I came back, I found that they were nobody's child. They didn't have rain gear, they didn't wear gloves, they didn't have shoes, caps, and hats, anything like that. And I wrote to whomsoever there was, they released some amount of money, and today at least they've got some amount of rain protection gear, if nothing else. But it's just a question of, here's another man, another person, another human being who is working for you, doing your service. And I think it's my duty to somehow reciprocate and say thank you very much. We first came here, there was no such facility in Kodagu for handling differently abled children. And she'd been doing this for years before we got married. And I think when Jack Subaya, who was with the president of Kodagu Vidyalaya, learned about it, he got her into the act. And that's when in, I think, November 1996, the opportunity section first started. And after that, Cheshire Homes set up their place in Polybeta and Swastha in Suntikopa.
Sir, before winding up, the last question. We all pray to God. In army also, Army, Air Force, we have our mandir parades and all. During service, when did you feel that the influence of God is guiding you? Any such?
Oh, I've always believed in God, but only in God by any name, right? What do you call Allah? Jesus was Son of God, right? But here in the Indian pantheon, there are a million gods and goddesses. But fine, there's Lord Shiva, Vishnu, Ganapati. I pray to God.
Before getting into the fighter pilot, did you ever pray? Or?
No, never. I was never like that. While in service, in fact, I've always had an affinity, quite honestly, towards Sikhism. So I would go to Gurdwara regularly. And even today when I pray to God, but I use the Guru Granth Sahib has something called the Japji Sahib, with which you may be familiar. It's a thing that's said. I listen to it every morning on my.
Ardas, it's got something.
No, it's not Ardas. It's just a prayer. It's got 40 odd verses, small verses, and I listen to that every morning. But as I say, I would. When I came, I used to go to the mosque regularly. There used to be an imam there who would come from North Bengal, and I got chatting.
In Madikeri.
In Madikeri, what's this place? Madhupet, the main masjid. And I would sit with him and I'd say, teach me, tell me something about the Quran. He would. Very nice man. And eventually he left because I think there was some politics that came into the thing. But I still go and meet him from time to time. He has a house there. He has 2 children, a daughter who's was becoming a pharmacist, I think. She was studying in this place, in Mysore. And a son who I'm trying to get to join the armed forces.
Oh, excellent. I don't think people who are not part of armed forces will never understand how can a Hindu pray in the mosque, or how can a Christian pray in the Gurudwara, because in the services it's like the religion of your troop is the officer religion, that kind of.
Sorry?
The religion of the troops will be the religion of the officers.
So is?
Something like in a Sikh regiment, a Sikh CO may be a Hindu, but he will go and sit in.
Yeah, absolutely. There may be no difference. I mean, after all, the one thing that we're taught is the famous, you know, Naam Namak Nishan. That's all that matters.
So it has been fantastic 1 hour where we spoke a lot of things. Going back to I'm very grateful for you to recollect. You went back and recollected all those days from your childhood, from being an young officer, the way you saw war. So thank you so much for coming, for agreeing to come to our show and sharing your journey. It is always a fantastic experience to listen to you.
Well, I'm honored that you should think so, and particularly because you and I have a kind of affinity having worn uniform, number one. Number two, we also have an affinity towards physical fitness, right?
Yes.
Which is so important to both of us. I miss seeing you, since you don't come to the gym anymore. But I'm so in awe of all that you do, your yoga and your running and all of that. And of course, the big plus point of your coming here today is we've got Dr. to come and Dr. Rajshri to come and spend some time with us too. Yeah. Thank you.